Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on right now is not an impeachment hearing. It is being phrased as an impeachment hearing for a reason, and that reason is to appeal to far-left radical activists who will show up in the primary to pick the next president for the Democrat Party or the next candidate to run for president against Trump. That's all that's going on right now. You understand that? Now, the best piece I've seen on this, on the distinction between an actual impeachment trial and what Nancy Pelosi is doing now in this fake impeachment, where they called a witness yesterday in their fake impeachment trial, and it really didn't go too well. Too bad, so sad, not so much. The first witness yesterday. Before we get to that, Andy McCarthy has a fine piece in the Hill. I love this piece. It'll be up in the show notes, and I strongly recommend you read it. Show notes available at bongino.com. Subscribe to my email list. I'll email them right to you. Andy McCarthy, one of the brightest legal minds out there on television, says, ignore the hype. This is not an impeachment inquiry. Folks, impeachment is a constitutional process. A majority of the House of Representatives can vote to impeach the president. The impeachment is the equivalent of, say, an indictment in the legal system. There is then a trial. A lot of liberals don't know that. They think impeachment means you're removed from office. It doesn't. There is then a trial in the United States Senate presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. In that trial, 67 out of the 100 United States senators are required to convict the president on the charges in the articles of impeachment, which are the equivalent of, say, a legal system indictment. If you don't get 67 senators, then the president may have been impeached, but he will certainly not be removed from office. Get it? Again, that history lesson is not for the intelligent listeners of the show. It's for the liberals who seem confused about what's happening. So you may say to yourself, well, why aren't they taking a vote, Dan? If you said a majority, we need a majority to get an impeachment charge or articles of impeachment. Why aren't they taking a vote? Isn't there some kind of a process? Well, there was. There was for the presidents that have been impeached in the past, Johnson and Clinton. No, Nixon wasn't impeached. He resigned before it happened. Sorry, liberal media people who keep reporting that. Nixon wasn't impeached. What's actually going on here is a bull rush. Now, why is that? Ladies and gentlemen, impeachment was designed specifically, hence my primer there, to be a very deliberate process. It was designed to be, hopefully, a nonpartisan process, because removing a president from office and overturning the results of an election is a very, very serious thing. What is going on now is not a long, deliberate process. It is a bull rush to the fences. Andy McCarthy explains this well. Let's go to piece number one from takeaway number one from Andy's piece. He says, moreover, there are no subpoenas. As Secretary Pompeo observed in his fittingly tart response on Tuesday when the committee chairman, what he issued was merely a letter. Its huffing and puffing notwithstanding, the letter is nothing more than an informal request for voluntary cooperation. Legally, it has no compulsive power. If anything, it is rife with legal deficiencies. Okay, we're going to go back to that in a second. So let's be clear what's going on here. Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi gave that presser last week and said, we're sending these demand letters to Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, to testify about Ukraine Gate. Also, they're trying to pretend this was a subpoena to appease the left that wants a formal impeachment process. Paul, if this gets confusing, yell in here, okay? Because it's important, folks. That is not what's going on right now. There was no subpoena to Mike Pompeo. What Adam Schiff sent was the equivalent of a blank you letter. You get the rest. To Pompeo. It was a letter. That was it. We demand you come forward. And if you don't come forward and speak to us, it was not a subpoena. They could issue subpoenas, but they're not. I'll get to that reason in a second, too. You may say, Dan, he's a committee chair in Congress. They can issue congressional subpoenas. Why not just subpoena Pompeo? Oh, I will get to that. They just sent a letter. You get your butt over here, Mike. We need to talk to you. To which Pompeo said, no, thanks. You're not going to threaten me like that. Put that first screenshot back up again. Andy McCarthy goes on. The Democrats, of course, hope you don't notice that the House is not conducting a formal impeachment inquiry. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no vote, no subpoenas. They're using the guise of frenetic activity by several standing committees, Intel, Judiciary, Foreign Affairs, Oversight, Reform, Financial Services, Ways and Means, whose normal oversight functions are being gussied up to look like this is serious impeachment business. Folks, why did they not send the subpoena? They didn't send the subpoena because impeachment is not a legal process. It is not a criminal trial. There's a trial in the Senate. But ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake. Impeachment is a political process. It is not a legal one. It may be worded in the Constitution, treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanor, worthy of impeachment. But make no mistake, the Democrats have turned this into a political referendum against Donald Trump to get rid of him before the 2020 election. Stay tuned to the end of the show. I want to play a video if I can get to it. That's really good. About how they're so terrified Trump is going to win again in 2020 that they see impeachment as their only way to overturn the results of the election. This is not illegal. They have no evidence of high crimes, misdemeanor, treason, or bribery at all against Donald Trump. This is a political trial. What does that have to do with the subpoena? Ladies and gentlemen, if they were to issue a formal subpoena, which they did not, that subpoena would likely be litigated in court because the Trump team's not just going to turn information over. They have executive privilege also. Well, what's the problem with that? If the Trump team committed a high crime, misdemeanor, treason, or bribery, then wouldn't the Democrats want to get that in court and litigate that? Keep it out in the public eye to make the Trump team look bad? No, they don't. Because they don't actually have any evidence. So they did this little slick trick, and I'll get to another piece of McCarthy's piece in a second, a little portion of it, because he explains this well. So what they're doing is they're pretending to impeach the president because they want to nail him on a charge. You may say, well, what charge is that, Dan? Treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors? They have none of that. So they have to do what they did in the collusion hoax when it didn't work out. Go right back to Democrat Adam Schiff, ace in the hole. And what's that? Obstruction of justice. Remember how that one worked out in the Mueller probe? He colluded with the Russians. Well, there's no evidence he colluded with the Russians. Well, he definitely obstructed justice into a case about colluding with the Russians, although he didn't collude with the Russians. Remember that one? How they flipped the script? I only predicted that one 2 years ago. That's what they're doing now. Tape this portion of the show and keep it on your phone. Tape it. I'm showing my age. Get a pencil and spin the thing around. You older folks know what I'm talking about who are my age. They are not going to have a case against Trump. There was no quid pro quo with Ukraine. I got that coming up in a second, too. They have nothing. So they're going to initiate another faux investigation, send a bunch of demand letters. And when those demand letters aren't complied with, they are going to level an impeachment article of obstruction of justice. What? Just get ready. From Andy McCarthy's piece. This is a great piece. So worth your time. But standing committees do have subpoena power, so why not use it? Well, because subpoenas get litigated in court when the people or agencies on the receiving end object to them. Democrats want to have an impeachment show, an inquiry on television. They don't want to have to defend its bona fides in an actual court. They certainly do not want to defend their letter. They're talking about the letter they sent to Pompeo. You better appear. The Democrats' media scribes note the chairman's admonition that any failure by Pompeo to comply with their letter, listen to this, folks, shall constitute evidence of obstruction of the House's impeachment inquiry. What a crock. I'll rephrase Andy's last portion. What a pile of... Really? So you have the power, Nancy Pelosi, to take a House floor vote to levy actual articles of impeachment. You can issue formal congressional subpoenas. Why are you not doing any of that? Because they are in a rush in a political process and they don't want to wind up in court having to defend charges that don't exist. All they have is the president's unwillingness to comply with their ridiculous demands. They're setting him up for an obstruction charge. Now, I haven't explained why the speed is necessary. They're in a rush with these letters and they don't want it litigated in court. So they're using letters instead of subpoenas for a very simple reason. They thought they had the president on the hook. Huh? They thought. They thought the Ukraine gate, the phone call, the fake quid pro quo, they thought they'd turn the corner on public opinion. Now they've got a bit of a problem, folks. President's raising record amounts of money. His approval rating's at an all-time high. It's not quite working out the way they thought it was. So Nancy Pelosi's telling her members, from what I'm getting behind closed doors, ladies, gents, it's time to make this thing move, and fast, because we're losing the initiative. We're losing the initiative. That's from a movie somewhere, I forget. They can't go through subpoena, legal process. Gosh, we want this guy out of office. Let's just send the letter. And if they don't comply with the letter, threaten them with obstruction. By the way, let me just clear up one thing, too, before I move on, because they called their first witness in their fake impeachment trial yesterday. And their first witness, Kurt Volker, it absolutely blew up in their hysterically blew up in their face. This is some epic stuff. But let me clear up one thing as well. I've been getting a lot of emails on this, and it's important. It's important. We're going to put that on a shirt. It's important. Folks, asking a foreign government for help is not evidence of an FEC violation. We discussed this earlier in the week with Ellen Weintraub from the FEC, who's trying to make up new charges that foreign governments' help is somehow a campaign violation. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not true. As the example I gave earlier in the week in the Wall Street Journal, what if your Uber driver, who's not a U.S. citizen, tells a campaign representative sometime some information about a campaign? Is that what do you do? Are you all going to be arrested? People still have free speech, not to mention we have treaties with both China and Ukraine, joint corruption agreements where we'll investigate corruption and exchange information. President Trump complying by those treaties and trying to get to the bottom of the corruption in the Obama administration and the Hunter Biden fiasco overseas with his dad is not only not unethical, it's entirely ethical and compliant with the law. This nonsense out there that this is somehow a campaign donation or campaign violation, how? Is President Trump fulfilling his duties, complying with his treaty obligations to investigate corruption? It's nonsense. That's totally, completely made up. It's a Democrat fairy tale. All right. So I had to set that up. Forgive me for the intro. A little long. But I had to set up the fake charges. It's not a campaign violation. He's simply doing what the treaties obligate him to do. Investigate corruption. But secondly, this is not an impeachment inquiry going on. Impeachment trial. This is an impeachment inquiry. It's a fake impeachment. They're not issuing subpoenas. And why are they doing this? Because they want a bull rush. They want a bull rush and obstruction charge when Trump doesn't comply. And they can't have the obstruction charge drag on because the subpoenas are litigated. They want the obstruction charge now. That makes sense, Paula? Okay, thank you. So they called their first witness yesterday, Kurt Volker, who was a special envoy to Ukraine. Now, backstory, Volker's the one in the text with Rudy Giuliani. They're setting up this meeting with the new Ukrainian president, Zelensky. So Volker got roped into this, and Giuliani had some text he showed on TV. Giuliani was asked by Volker, apparently, at some point, to go and talk to Zelensky. Giuliani has the texts. So Volker was brought up yesterday to talk to them up on the Hill. And ladies and gentlemen, the media was losing their minds. This is it. This special envoy, Kurt Volker, is going to bury the Trump team. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the smoking gun. This was smoking gun number 62,000, just like the State Department ICIG the other day, Linnick, who wound up blowing up their spot totally, giving information on Yovanovitch and others. So everything's blown up. Schiff was like, this is it. Volker's going to blow it up. He's going to give us an example of the quid pro quo. Kurt Volker, who knows the Ukrainian story, is going to tell everybody that Trump threatened military aid, withholding military aid, if they didn't give up information on Hunter Biden. So much so that ABC News got to scoop. Check out this fake news tweet they put up. This is just peachy. Don't worry, I'll get to the bottom of this for you, as always. Breaking. Bill Taylor, top U.S. diplomat to Ukraine, wrote that he thought it's, quote, crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign in newly disclosed text messages shared with lawmakers. Oh, man. Oh, they got him now. This is a Maalox moment. They got Paula. They got him. They got him. There it is, folks, in a text. Can you put that up again? Bill Taylor, this Ukrainian diplomat. Look at this guy. He got a text message to our top diplomat in Ukraine. It's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign. Breaking. You may say, Dan, this is it. That's the quid pro quo. One of Trump's own people on the inside, these diplomats involved in this. There's a little problem with that text. Let's go to foxnews.com and let's talk about what happened in response. That was conveniently left out of that tweet. No, that tweet is cleverly worded. FoxNews.com. Ex-Ukraine envoy Volker meets with lawmakers amid impeachment probe as texts reveal quid pro quo dispute. This piece will be up in the show notes too. Well, what's the dispute? That guy, Bill Taylor's saying it right there, right? Bill Taylor, who's the chargé, by the way, for the number 2 in Ukraine for the United States. Well, what was the actual text exchange? Let's put up this piece from FoxNews.com because we don't do fake news here. Here's the Taylor text first. Again, as I said on the phone, he's texting, by the way, Volker. He's not. He's texting, who is he texting? Gordon Sondland, who is our ambassador to the EU. He says, as I said on the phone, it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign, Taylor said in a text exchange. Sondland responded by saying, that was not what was happening. Oh, no, don't go to leave this. This is fascinating how they leave this part out. Put that back up. Gordon Sondland, our ambassador to the EU, who's in this text exchange. This response is left out of the text, making it look like there's an actual quid pro quo. Put that back up a second. Here we go. Here's the response. Bill, I believe you are incorrect about President Trump's intentions. The president has been crystal clear. No quid pro quos of any kind. The president is trying to evaluate whether Ukraine is truly going to adopt the transparency and reforms that President Zelensky promised during his campaign. Both men then agreed to cease discussing the matter over text, noting that phone calls with appropriate officials would be oh gosh, I can't even finish the sentence. Again, folks, it's funny how they bash us, right? All of us out there. Trump supporters, Republicans who aren't Trump supporters, but are conservatives, libertarians says, we're all conspiracy theorists, we're all nuts. I'm just giving you the facts. That's the actual text exchange. One guy's confused about what he thinks is a quid pro quo. And the other guy who is actually, I'll get to this in a second too, Gordon Sondland, who was actually at the meeting the next day with the president of Ukraine, by the way, clears it up and says, let me be crystal clear. There are no quid pro quos of any kind. You think that's an important detail you may want to throw in there when trying to make the case for a quid pro quo? That was a quid pro no, not a quid pro quo. My mother texted me, what is quid pro quo? I think I told you that. Something for something, a deal. There was no deal. Now you may say, what the heck would our ambassador to the EU know? What would he know about this whole thing? How is he connected to this? Well, let's go to the Ukrainian government, which issued this little release here. Here's an actual photo. By the way, I want to hat tip Rosie Memos on Twitter. Always does a nice job. That is the highlights. So hat tip Rosie Memos. Follow that account. Here's the president of Ukraine's official website. President met with U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine and U.S. Representative to the European Union. Kurt Volker and Gordon Sondland. There's the picture. They're actually at the meeting, but I want you to look at the date and notice who's not there. The guy, Bill Taylor, who puts in the text, hey, is this a quid pro quo? He's not actually at the meeting. Gordon Sondland and Kurt Volker are. Volker shows up to testify to this stuff yesterday. There's no quid pro quo. And look at the date of the meeting, or the date this was released. The date of the meeting, July 26, 2019. Why does that matter? Why does that date matter? Ladies and gentlemen, because it's the day after the Trump phone call this whole hullabaloo was started over. It's the day after the Trump call to Ukraine and the president was July 25th. So just to be clear, Gordon Sondland, who is actually in the meeting the day later, who makes crystal clear in a text there are to be no quid pro quos of any kind in a text message, goes and meets with the Ukrainian president the next day to relay this message on behalf of President Trump with Kurt Volker, who's called to testify yesterday. And yet your charge still is going to be in your fake impeachment that's not an impeachment. It's just a bunch of hey you letters. Your charge is going to be there was a quid pro quo. You have counter evidence of that. You don't have evidence. You have anti-evidence. You have a transcript with no quid pro quo. You have a text from a guy in the meeting with the Ukrainian president the next day saying there's no quid pro quo. And you have another guy questioning it who wasn't even in the meeting.